Okay, then you are not able to take care of overloading, and neither are you going to take care of the muda that is born out of this. So fundamental is stability or reduction where above this comes the concept of Hijunka, standardized work, and Kaizen. What is Hijunka? Hijunka is nothing but to understand how to level the load. And that is why you have things like every half an hour, I will take out this set of product in this sequence. The sequencing is done every half an hour, not first hour, second hour, third hour, or first 2 hours I will manufacture this, second 2 hours I'll manufacture this. No, there are five products have different takt time, and hence every half an hour you are trying to reduce the variability of load coming on a resource. So Hijunka has got two parts. One part is the machine load, the second part is the workman's load. And we try to sequence the production in such a way that every half an hour is repeated, but within half an hour, the load is similar on every half an hour. If I'm clear, please understand it is load leveling so that we avoid the wave in loading pattern. Okay. Then after having done this, the second cause of variation is how will the person perform? Suppose the takt time says you have to produce 200 per hour, and when the demand is less, you have to produce only 100 per hour. Okay, both these levels of operation need to be standardized because you may need to add one more workman there, you may need to add extra inventory there, you may need to reduce inventory, whatever, but standardized work is the second understanding to make sure that you are able to take care of the load. And then both these things are operations. And then comes Kaizen. Kaizen means Kaizen is, please don't take it as a lip service. It is one of the most scientific things. So Kaizen is the third understanding concept where we scientifically look at reducing variability. Okay, you can take it as improvements, but any improvement means reduction of variability. When you start talking about Kaizen through science, you are talking about conducting experiments, and these experiments will fail. In fact, 80% of the scientific experiments fail, but your knowledge is created by that failure. So this is the upper foundation. So make sure you have stability, you practice stability, you understand where the variability is coming from, then use these concepts called load leveling, standardized work, and Kaizen to reduce the second level of variability. And these two are your foundation. On these foundation are on this foundation are two pillars. On the left is just in time, and on the right is Jidoka. What is just in time? We are looking at continuous flow. We are looking at to maintain takt time, and we are looking at pull system. You will see that a pull system is different from takt time or continuous flow. Pull system is very simply put a Kanban system. That means there is a communication channel that goes right from the demand to the raw material pull, right? So you'll only decide to send the material forward when you get a signal. And this is called on the left pillar just in time, and the right is called Jidoka. Very simply put, Jidoka is about machine work and human work. You have to separate both of them and then work on it. So what you see here is on the left is called the flow of material, how the material will flow, in what quantity will flow, when will it flow. So it's more to do with how communication channels are strong, the quantities are defined, etc., etc. Material flow. And the right is about machine and work. So one is called offline, the second is called inline. Okay, why offline? And because our machine has to be available, the man has to be available, okay, for the material to flow. It can happen that the material is there to be worked upon, but you're changing the machine. Again, there is a hindrance to flow. So we make sure that these two pillars, now Jidoka is a far bigger concept than what I've just said. And it is a concept which says that we should not produce defective item. Okay. Now, when we say we should not produce defective item, okay, that doesn't mean that you stop. That is why it said stop and notify abnormalities. So abnormalities, that doesn't mean defect only. Okay, so the machine should know when to stop and when to separate the rejected material, etc., etc. That means there is enough practice built in, okay, where the systems can take a decision to accept or reject a product. Now, this is one of the big practices which has helped Toyota balance the load on human beings and also allow one man to operate multiple machines. Based on this, two pillars is the roof. So, Jidoka and just in time are the two main driving philosophies or principles which help us to achieve the highest quality at lowest cost and at the shortest lead time. This is how Toyota has managed to define its Toyota production system in early 80s or maybe late 70s. However, this is again the same driving principle for Toyota in 2018. In other words, this simple representation is still effective as the driving principle for Toyota in 2018 onwards, when it came out and redefined what Toyota will have in this century. Now, I speak this to set the context. And when I set the context, I'm saying that now, where does 5S sit inside this? Okay, 5S mostly sits on the Jidoka side. Okay, it is about how you make sure that the worker and machine, okay, both work very well. And then it partly sits on just in time to make sure that the material flow as well as, okay, other small things that going to make sure that the JIT is in play because a lot of information has to flow visually. Okay, this is what is done. So 5S seems to be a backbone of both these pillars. And hence, many consultants, many people who are aware of 5S will say that the first step to implementing lean is to practice 5S. However, I cannot say anything on this because it is neither fully correct, neither fully wrong. Okay. Now, this is a statement which in fact tells you, okay, that you can actually gather all the information required to improve your flow for just in time practice and also what to work on to make sure that the machine and the work and the human work is good is also available. So this is where 5S sits. 5S sits on the Jidoka side partly and partly on the just in time. So you can say that it is pervasive. But the practice of 5S on both the pillars is much different. So today we will start with understanding 5S on the shop floor, and then I will expose you to how 5S works in deciding how much material can be supplied, when it can be supplied, etc., etc., and hence take it to the level of operations management. Okay, we call it 5S because there are 5 Japanese words that start with S. Seri, Sito, Siso, Siketsu, and Shitsuke. My Japanese is not good, neither is my pronunciation. Okay, so I'm trying to pronounce these Japanese words with an understanding of Indian English. Okay, uh, so live with this and just remember that out of these 5, the usual practice in Toyota used to be about 4S. Okay, and the 5th S, that is the last one to the right, Shitsuke, is about discipline. Okay, so if this is the Japanese for 5S, I am now exposing you to the meaning of this. So seri means to sort, sito means to straighten, siso is to clean, siketsu is cleanliness, and shitsuke is discipline. The problem we have is trying to give the meaning in one word. And if anybody is aware of the Japanese language is a unique language, I think quite similar to Hindi, I would say. But you have, you can say 5 words for the sound levels, or maybe 3 words for sound. But all 3 words tell about the sound at different intensity. So a language which is so precise, okay, is tough to translate into English in one word, because we'll have to say, oh, it was very high sound. Okay, it was noise. Okay, and things like that. So if the sound is in 3 levels, the Japanese have 3 different words and they tell you the intensity of the sound. And this is why it becomes extremely tough to get the essence of that word into English. And hence, a lot of training is required. But my idea here is to make sure that you get the essence. So seri, siton, siso, siketsu, and chitsuke, okay, are nothing but sort and straighten, clean and cleanliness, and finally, it is about making sure that there's a discipline. So a better perspective is this: seri, siton, siso, chiketsu, and shitsuke. How does it
Sir,
work? It
excuse me,
works
sir.
very simply that you,
Hello, Shishir
yeah,
sir. So, Mr.
yes,
Abhishek has given answer of
mm,
this these word: sort, set in order, shine, standardization. So, are these correct?
uh,
And one more is there.
uh,
Actually, my screen is
mm,
not slowing down. So he's
mm.
saying, is it correct? Sustain, I
Yes, it
guess.
is correct.
That, yeah.
Yeah, sustain, sustain. It is sustain. If he's using, what is the first word he's used? Sort.
Sort, set in order, shine,
Huh?
standardize, and sustain.
Huh?
So Mr. Vishwas is also
Yes.
knowing the language, I guess. Mr. Vishwas
Huh?
K. Sharma. So he said yes, these are correct.
Yeah.
Sort. This is
Like
not
I
short
said that.
actually. Sort. SORT. Sort.
s- Yes, sort, sort. It's okay. So please understand that I am using, okay, the terminology as given by Mr. Taichi Ono, okay, in his book Workplace Management. Okay. So if if uh, anybody has got a newer version, I would just refer to the newer version also. But Mr. Taichi Ono explains why does he use those words. Okay. Now you can make it, like I said, we are translating Japanese into English. Yes, there could be more than one word. Okay, shine and sustain or whatever may be the thing. These are how you describe it. But my idea here is to make sure that we understand the spirit of it. Okay, and that's why we're calling it training. So I am okay. There are so many other words of the people written books on 5S, and they have got a different word. You can have sorting and clean and orderliness. Instead of sorting, there many people old time people used to use organization. Okay, so they used to use organization, that is called sorting, and then they used to call orderliness, okay, instead of straighten or the second word. Anyway, please feel free. Okay, there's so many people, but the request here is don't get stuck in the jargon. Okay, so the slide here which I'm trying to present here is that whatever may be the definition in itself, they do not exist independent of each other. They are supposed to be viewed like this. Now, seri, siton, siso, siketsu are 4 terminologies which are feeding into each other. But the thing driving it is in the center called shitsuke. It's called discipline. Okay. And why does it happen? Because no environment is constant. Look at 5S on the shop floor. What happens if you change the item code? You have to produce a different item. Okay. We assume that the same tool is going to be working. No, the quantity may change, the size may change, the jig may change, the fixture may change, the inspection instrument may change. So many things are there to change, and they will occupy different places. The volume might be bigger than the previous volume. So how do you store it? The fact always remains here is that environment will force a company to constantly change. An environment could be demand also. So, like people say that all those people who do not change because the environment has changed are probably likely to perish. The example of dodo is often quoted that it was a bird in Mauritius and the Dutch came with their dogs and pigs and, and the dodo, because it couldn't fly, didn't want to move, it perished. Okay, the environment has changed, but dodo didn't want to change. Similarly, the reason why I say that the spirit is so important here because the environment will keep changing, forcing you to keep practicing. And there is nothing called a static 5S. Okay, let's go ahead. Seri Sito. Seri means clearly distinguishing between what is needed and is to be kept and what is unneeded and is to be discarded. Sito means to straighten. Arrange items that are needed in a neat and easy to use manner. Every item in place and a place for every item. You will see that I'm using these two S's in a pair. And this is how it is supposed to be practiced. You will always do Seri Sito together. Why? Because there is no need to straighten anything, organize anything, put in orderly manner, which should not have been done at all. Now, when we come to Seri, okay, what is needed and is to be kept and what is unneeded and is to be discarded, this is one of the toughest thing to practice. For example, your production says you need 10 units today and 10 units tomorrow. And the purchasing guy has ordered 30 units. Will you accept this order or not? The question is that you only need 20 as per your plan. Okay, so the 10 has to be sent back. Similarly, there's so many things. Sometimes the quantity is short, sometimes the time is before, and many times the functionality suffers. So Seri, very simply put, keep what is needed. So first is to identify your need. It is not that because you are a stores manager, you are arranging everything. No. So first you will sort. And then we go to straighten. Now straighten here, like somebody else says, I use the word orderliness, or we can say organize also. Okay. Straighten means arrange items that are needed in a neat and easy to use manner. That means FIFO should not be violated, whether it is an item that you're going to work on or it's a tool to be used. Now, when I say every item in place and a place for every item, that does not mean if the tool is going to be used on a CNC machine and it's an expensive tool, you keep it in the stores. So first is, if you do so, you are creating muda of motion for the worker. But just imagine the material is waiting on the machine to be processed and the worker is running to get the tool. So first is you have a place defined, but where should this place be defined? Okay, this is then taken care later on. But when I say a place for everything, everything in its place, it also means second thing, that is how much to put in place, etc., etc. But when we say straighten, that does not mean organize. It means easy to use manner. Okay, when you ask a very simple thing, people have got their cupboards totally organized, but their shirt, their white shirt is at the bottom, and by the time they take it out, it's already crushed. Why? Because the load on it is too much. Now this is not easy to use manner layout. We have big stores and we appoint a stores manager, but he's always busy issuing something else when the worker is waiting for something else. It is still not called straightening. We have very good store managers who tell you what the inventory is, okay, and they're always busy. No, 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 this is not called straightening. It is not very to use manner, okay. Begin with this idea that how do I make sure that the item is sorted, arranged in a manner easy to use. You will see that these two are the first two steps that anybody should take. You can have a strategy of sorting. Okay, long time ago there used to be a strategy called red tag strategy, where you just begin with sorting the item and putting a red tag on it, and then looking at it for how long this red tag was there in your factory. Okay, so you need to have a very clear understanding in very, very simple definition, but it is consistent across. I'm using these examples from the shop floor. I'm not going to the supply chain part. I will touch on the supply chain part on operations management later on. Okay, but it's extremely important to pay attention on this. So let's say, how do you practice SERI? Now there are things available and you have decided to classify them into three parts: can be used, cannot be used, unlikely to be used. Now, what are the conditions that make an item to fall into can be used and cannot be used and unlikely to be used? Because once you get into this sorting behavior, you are also going to tag them and then you're going to take a action on them, right? Let's say that the first three conditions that you have identified, if they suffice, you will classify an item in can be used. There's sufficient function, that means the item is good enough. The sufficient period, that means the item is available for a certain period of time. Okay, so it is good in that period. And the sufficient amount, that means you can say the quality is good, okay, and it is good enough for use in the period, or it is enough to be consumed in the period, and the amount is also as desired. I mentioned before that should the amount be more or less, it renders that item unusable. So everything is okay here. Now, if there's insufficient function, that means there is a deterioration in, you can say, quality. We need to wait for a deviation. Insufficient period, that means it is before time, after time, and it is not in correct amount. Okay, so it cannot be used. That means that you are not going to throw it out, but it makes itself useless. Now, if you are able to put this classification on an item, you are also able to send the data on top to the purchase guy or to the vendor, okay, that his quantities are not matching, or there's a problem in, in the functionality, there's an error, whatever may be, okay, but it is a delay, and any delay means there is a inventory line somewhere, let it be stores or on the line, and hence somebody will have to manage it. So sorting is, if followed this way, allows you to take that corrective action. Then let's come to unlikely to be used. Unlikely to be used, that means you prefer not to use it, or it seems unnecessary. It could be old stock, okay, or it could be a machinery which does not give you the reliability or stability or the required output. So you do not use it. However, you cannot throw it because the current salvage value of the machine is less than the book value. It will cause loss on your sheets. Okay, so when you're practicing SERI, a simple thing like how will you classify them? You can have more conditions than this. Mine is just an example. Okay, so when we get down to practicing sorting, okay, you can have various levels, but please understand that we try and conduct a 5S audit every month. Why we do that? Because we see that how has your sorting moved. Something which was cannot be used in last audit, if it goes to unlikely to be used, that means there was a error in classification, right? And that is what can force your quality department or vendor development department to go and make sure that the insufficient function never happens again. Anyway, so a practice of SERE can force you to develop checklists, can force you to develop your relationship with suppliers, etc., etc. Now, when you're practicing Sito, okay, a rider is always in place. And the thing is, practice Sito in combination with SERE. There is no bigger waste than organizing things you never need. So only after you have done your classification or sorting in SERE, you'll go to Sito. That means you organize it. Okay, here are some examples. To straighten means keep the items or tools in correct sequence of use. And second, the most important understanding, the tools should be sharpened and ready to use. So it is not good enough that the tools are in their place, okay, but the tools have to be ready to use. Should it happen that the person working requires to go and sharpen the tool when it's required, your Seto is not working. Now, this is an example, a very, very firm example. Now, just imagine if the place where your tool is stored is in the storeroom, away from the machine. It is quite likely that the eyeball control is missing because the worker there has got no clue whether the tool is available or not, and secondly, whether it is ready for use or not. Okay, so when we talk about storing, you have to make sure that you store the items close to the place of use. And here comes in your inventory, right? So the item that you're working on is also to be stored close to it. It should happen that the person has to walk so much to get it from a earmarked place, which is in the corner of the shop floor, brings it and works on it and again sends it back. Now, please see that if you're sorting and straightening is not in order, you are creating tons and tons of muda. Muda, as we all know, is the seven wastes. Now, when we start experimenting, now every item might be different. One could be big, one could be small, one could be low volume, one could be high volume. So low volume can be kept next to the machine, but high volume cannot. So you have to then decide what should be the batch size for transportation, right? So when you sort and straighten, you are also trying to make sure that you are choosing the adequate size of storage. Again, this falls in straightening. What does this do? It helps you reduce the search time. If everything is properly stored in the place, you know exactly where it is. Okay. You, and if it is there, it is present. If it's not there, okay, watch it. You also know that where other person has to keep it. Okay. So what happens is if you have a proper storage, okay, you also avoid wrong tools or equipments for use. There could be two tools similar, right? But when we say proper storage, that means your identification, your naming, etc., can be also properly done. An example I'll quote here is, let's say there's a parking in the company, and in the parking you write MD's car, chairman's car, plant head's car. So the plant head or anybody who's from within the company may know the plant head's car is, but anybody can come and park their car, which is similar to the MD's car in the slot and go. So you are not doing straightening properly. So with the MD's name, you have to also write the car number. Then we know, everybody knows that it is the MD who has parked the car there. Okay, so you have to have such good leveling, okay, in the Shinto practice, straightening practice, that it is eyeball identifiable. Okay, and then when you're practicing Shinto, you have to move towards standardization. That means every operator will know where to locate its things. Okay, it does not depend on if an operator is particularly operating one machine, if he's not present, the second guy finds it tough to operate. Again, wrong. Your standardization practice is also a standard straightening practice where you are able to actually tell people how to operate, and anybody can come and operate. So after there's been a straightening, shortening, whatever way, you are going to standardize it. You can label it correctly, you can identify it with colors correctly, you can identify, etc., etc. Okay. So if one has to answer it in one question, you will say what, where, and how many. So when you're trying to store and straighten, what has to be stored, where it has to be stored, and how many. Now, how many is the first step to a visual control factory. You have identified that there should be just one tool in the place where the tool is supposed to be kept. Now you see this, there are two tools. What is it? Extra inventory. You have identified a place where the item to be operated is to be kept, and there is just place for keeping, let's say, 4 bins. Okay, you have made a control that the moment there's a 5 bin available, you get a visual control signal, right? So when you are putting a place, sorting and straightening, you have to also make sure how many have to be present. Another example, you have your office inventory, right? So pencils, if you just write pencils, you can keep 50 pencils there. But if you just say there could be maximum 2 pencils present here based on the consumption rate and whatever may be, if there are 10, you know that 8 have to be taken away. That means somebody is ordered extra. This is called, again, a waste of seri. I don't need it, but it's come. So when we start straightening and sorting, I'll keep using both the words simultaneously, sorting and straightening. You move to a place or a mode of operation which is now giving you so much of eyeball control that you are seeing the flow on the shop floor. Here's an example, or rather, how does Sito helps in office? If you're trying to put Sito in, or you're trying to do straightening job in your office, these are the 5 keys you should always use. Okay, to practice in the office. An example I'm quoting here is because mostly I've been quoting on the shop floor, and here it's about the whole company. Okay, so how do you judge it? Key number 1: eliminate searching waste. First rule. You can have, open boards, or you can have visual identifiers, color codings, and whatever maybe, or located in a place where everybody knows. Number 2, make it easier to locate and pick up for use. Make things easier to put back. Okay, so for example, many times the worker works on a part, and after that he has to turn back, bend over, okay, and put it in a bin. Okay, this is not a good practice. Many times you see people have to pack the item, and they have to pick up the paper from the left and pack it and keep it to the right. You can keep those packing papers hanging up. He can just pull it down. You know, so easy. Make things understandable at a glance. Again, an eyeball control practice. And the more you can make it understandable at a glance, the easier it is for anybody to behave. Okay. And all company property to be used in a predefined way and stored. That means you are actually standardizing the use of the items, whether it can be a paper pin, clip, you know, a card, white paper, printing, etc., etc. So if you're doing this, you're actually doing Sito in your office. Like I said, that most of this works in pair. Okay. I go to CISO and Siketsu. Okay. CISO means cleaning or sweep. Somebody said shine. Okay. When we talk about cleaning or sweeping, we are actually talking about doing physical work. Okay. Like you can see here, I'm saying cleaning or sweep. That is removing chips and dust from the machine. Now you would say that why should we remove dust or chips from the machine? It is not only to do with cleanliness. Okay. If the chips get stuck in a machine and they're left there for long periods of time, okay, you will see that the machine requires a lot of resetting and it starts producing rejection. So what is the objective? The objective is to make sure that the material flows at high speed and of high quality. Removing chips from the machine not only okay saves and keeps the machine clean, but also avoids any future damages. Plus, it also tells you over a period of time whether the machine is operating well or not. The chip size are breaking, or the steel is okay, etc., etc. And when we talk about dust, we are talking about keeping it clean from the dust because dust hides many things. The second thing, cleaning the machine by wiping off any spills. Why we say this? We say this because this is how you identify the start of the leak. If you leave the machine dirty and the leak has been happening for long, nobody knows when the leak started. In other words, nobody can tell you when the machine will fail. But if you know when the leak started, there is a good enough time we can estimate, okay, when the machine is going to fail. That means within which you need to quickly take it under repairs. The reason why we are not taking it under repairs may be availability of a spare part, or there is a production happening which is important. Depending on when the leak started and how much is the quantity of leak, you can decide. Okay. Then comes the cutting fluid leak. Now, if you keep it clean, you know the amount of cutting fluid or oil that has leaked. You can just top it up. Okay, it can just be a normal spill, or you know that somewhere something is stuck. Okay. The third aspect of cleaning is you immediately remove the rejected part from the area and put it to the identified area. So when we talk about cleaning or sweeping, we're talking about actions. Okay. Some actions need to be taken immediately, quickly. Okay. Then we go to the fourth part called Saiketsu, cleanliness or sanitary. Okay. Now, the essential difference between cleaning and cleanliness is you have now decided to standardize the cleanup. That means while cleaning, you might have seen that the access to the area is tough and things like that. So you start maintaining the layout, okay, of the machines in such a way that it looks orderly. Okay, basically, this is a condition that exists, cleanliness or sanitary clean. Okay, you can use a lot of paint also. Okay, it is also decided, or it's also the condition that exists when sorting, straightening, and cleaning are good. Okay, that means your work is easy to clean. Okay, and you are maintaining the cleanliness, and it's easy to maintain. And please understand that this is not a static test. It's not a static test. That means on the day there's a competition of 5S, you get everything organized. No, it is exactly how, okay, everything is in order. So if it is properly done, if the cleanliness is properly maintained, is very easily marked, very easy to push, you know where the items are being kept, nicely marked, or you can have color identification. Many shop floors even have the same coloring of the machines. Okay, all this is visual. Okay, but when we say cleanliness, that means sanitary. What was cleaning? Cleaning was physical work. Sanitary, that means you make sure that it is spick and span always. Okay, and do you do a layout? Okay, in other words, you are making sure that the dirt doesn't come back. Okay, a person finds it easy to go clean. Okay, so please understand that one is called physical work, the second is actually making sure that it remains that way. Now, if you want to practice cleanliness in a very advanced way, okay, you can start practicing 5W and 1H. Okay, the example could be there was a spill happening. Okay, you cleaned it, so it is always clean, but it kept coming, right? So you start going why. That means you do the analysis for why that cleaning was being done and make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay, so you maintain the cleanliness. If there's dust coming, is causing a problem, make sure it doesn't happen again. But as we say that a new machine may not require too much of effort, but as the machines get old, they may require. But mind you, this is also the first step to a autonomous maintenance, because the worker standing there, okay, knows his machine better than anybody else. So small things that he needs to do to make sure that his machine is capable of producing the work. Why? Because the intention is to produce a high quality work, not to just run the machine. An essential mindset difference arises here. The idea is to produce a good quality product, not to go to the machine and start running the machine. So a worker, by sweeping and trying to maintain cleanliness, is also trying to make sure that he is well aware of the state of the machine. We go to Shitsuke. Now, what is it, okay, that makes us take the learnings from this four, you can assess and make it an institution or make it a practice. So the discipline of getting 4S done, the previous 4S we talked about, it's Shitsuke. That's why I said discipline, and discipline is not routine or a practice. When I said discipline, it is how you are creating knowledge from the 4S. Okay, how the things have changed, if the machine has become old, how have you moved it out, if there is so much of, you know, arrangement of material flow, or let us say the muda is building up too much, there's too much of inventory, there's too much of motion. How do you take that learning and make sure that the 5S keeps getting practice? Okay, and through this discipline, then you develop a checklist. Okay, creating a checklist and evaluation criteria and documentation, etc. That means you're going to do an audit. How do you know that your 5S, for example, how do you know the material available is ready for use and easy to be transported? Right? That is what means sorting, right? Very easy to use. So the machine, the material could be properly put, the quantity could be right, but it requires a forklift to be moved. Right? You have to wait for the forklift to come. Again, it is waste of time. Now, suppose if you have your bins on rollers, so then you tick it off very well, saying that my material is properly stated, ready to use, very easy to be pushed. So Shitsuke is that discipline where it helps you develop checklists and create criterias which are going to make the practice of 4S far more easier. Okay. And in Shitsuke, we talk about leading by example. There's often, uh, you know, you can say shop floor in charge, who is given a task of making sure that the 4S is being practiced properly. And he's the 5th S. But if he doesn't lead by example, it is going to be tough. Okay. This is also about enforcing the 4S practice. Now, I've seen one thing very often in the factories, okay, by creating good boards, okay, by marking the walkways, okay, clearly, okay, etc., etc. People think that they're practicing 4S, 5S, okay. When we talk about enforcing 4S practices, we are talking about making sure that Muri Mura Muda, that means the 3 causes of variation are reduced in the pillar to the right, that is the Jidoka pillar. And because the products keep changing, because the machines keep changing, because the company keeps expanding, because the volume keeps fluctuating, the practice of 4S also has to adapt. Okay. Most importantly, stopping the deterioration of the practice of 4S. It is often seen that people say that we did 4S or 5S 15 years ago, and when you go onto the shop floor right now, it is in a mess. And they've got reasons for it. Yes, they've got reasons for it. So the volumes have gone up. Okay, we don't have places to store. Okay, now I've already mentioned before that why should the purchasing guy keep buying things for which you don't have a place to store? In other words, he is malpracticing 4S, and the malpractice of 4S in purchasing department shows off on the store guy's shoulder. So now when you're saying that you're going to stop deterioration of 4S practice, you are going to move beyond the shop floor onto the operations of other parts of the company. Okay. And if your discipline or if your knowledge creation or creating knowledge is very good, you will move towards creating a discipline of autonomous maintenance, where the maintenance gets split into 2 parts. Okay. Let us say the major maintenance or breakdown maintenance, etc., or preventive maintenance, okay, is done by the maintenance department. However, to see if the machine is capable, if the fluid is in place, if the pump is working, if the filter is not choked, etc., etc., becomes the practice on the shop floor by the person involved there. That means the worker there. So you can say, in other words, that when we standardize the practice of autonomous maintenance, it is Shitsuke being done on the shop floor. This is how the 5S actually works. But to be really, really honest, it is Seri Sito are the 2 building blocks of all this. Sort and straighten, sort and straighten. And if it is not first in, first out, you're not straightening properly. If the delivery quantity is more than the space available, again, your sorting is not very good, because you are getting more than what should be in order. So you need to develop so much of practice within the operations management, which helps you do the first 2S properly. So that is why you will see most of the places that people talk about, they talk about Cerecito. But after you've done Cerecito, the other 2S, okay, which is about cleaning and cleanliness, okay, they take a different meaning. When we talk about cleaning, it is visual identification, making sure that the items don't mix, then making sure that you have eyeball control. Okay, the machine is working, machine is not working, this is junked, very good identification, and then making sure that the cleanliness exists. Cleanliness could also lead to your plant layout change. Why? Because after doing a plant layout change, you have a better flow of material. Okay, and that means now the effort is less on the shop floor. One of the muda is transportation muda is also wiped out or reduced, and there is enough safety available for the people who are on the shop floor working. And if they are doing that, in other words, you are making sure that you produce good quality. Okay. This is how the 5S philosophy was developed in its core. There are many practitioners across the world who say that if you do 5S, that is the first time you understand where the material is choking, where you don't have space, what should be then done after having fun. In other words, 5S is the first step you do to deciding what should be the elements of your JIT. Okay. Now, when we start doing 5S, like I said in the beginning, it's eyeball control. You're moving towards a visual factory. Now, visual factory is also, you can say, the old name for what we are trying to do in Industry 4.0. Now, what you could have got and taken a decision by watching is now going to be done by sensors. So just imagine that if you have an excellent visual layout, clean, orderly factory, the need of sensors and this, etc., really goes down. But the appreciation is that you can imagine how important this is because it forms the backbone of communication. Just because there's a sensor, it sends you a data, and data is when interpreted becomes information, and that allows you to take an action. Is the machine down or working? Okay, let's say if there's a yellow light flashing, that means it is producing. Green, ready to work. Red, it's down. If the same thing is going to be sent to you by, let's say, an IoT device or a machine itself, it will come onto your text saying machine so and so producing this item. Right? Same thing, right? But it comes through an expensive IoT device, through the telephone network, blah, 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 which requires software backup and everything. So which is a cheaper way of doing it? Eyeball control. So to achieve where an eyeball control should be there, what you should do is done by shortening and straightening. Okay, shortening and straightening, then the other two are usually called maintenance works, and we have to make sure that there's a discipline. If you don't enforce the discipline here is not to be, telling people what to do. The discipline here means like a discipline of science. It's a learning mechanism where you accumulate all your knowledge and put it inside so that you can improve, you can convert it into systems, standardizations, etc., etc. Okay. So, does anybody have any question till now?
Yeah, let me check, sir. Otherwise, you can stop sharing your screen, and there you can check the questions, sir. That way also you can access your
Yeah, okay, wait. Let me
slides are
let me
not
come out of
changing.
it. Yeah, let
Are
me
you
come
able
out of
to
my
see that?
sharing the screen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now let me check. Okay.
So you have to scroll
Unable
it
to see
from top,
current
sir.
slide.
Top.
Okay. This is the chat box, right?
Yeah, this is the chat box. From top, you have to check the answers
I'm in the
from the
chat
top. Just
box.
scroll up.
Okay. Okay. I will just check. I will just
Yeah,
check. Wait.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, I'm on the job. Okay. Green. Okay. 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 That sounds good. Okay. Organized. Okay. Nature, little. Okay. Air, sound, can't see, visual identification.
That was for the slide which you showed that time, no? After that,
Yeah,
we
okay,
got
it's okay, it's okay.
few
I'm just
more
checking.
questions. Okay, fine.
Okay, I have gone through Abhishek's Sane's thing. Yes, it is correct. Okay, I think it's more of a okay, okay,
Mr. Sunil Kapoor is asking for the, please
okay.
share the Oshino book title.
Hmm. Okay, there's somebody by Mr. Ganesh D who says, "Sir, what about the sixth S safety, which is added to 5S workplace management? Kindly explain on this in the end." Okay, okay, I will. I can touch that in the end. Okay, okay. Unable to see current slide. Move. Fine. So I think most people have asked very generic things. I don't see anything which good. So Sanjogita is asking that what are pre-steps prior to 5S and after implementing 5S, what further can we do to improve our processes? Okay. Uh, please be very clear that it is a process of ongoing improvement. So just by saying that you have implemented 5S, you are actually moving away with the philosophy of continuous improvement. Okay. Now, you have used two words called practice of 5S and how do we improve our process further. Okay. When we talk about a process, we are talking about the whole company. That means when the material enters the company to when it gets dispatched. Everything you do is called process. Okay. Now, you have just started on the principles of 5S, and the principles of 5S will always remain in play to help you reduce waste, and this waste is variability. If you say that if you have removed all the waste, all the variability from the system, you are practically next to God. That means you're practically perfect. Okay. Now, to be really honest, this perfection doesn't exist because variability will hit your system. Now, let's come down to a simple thing called straightening or storage. Is this the only way you can store? Or have you found out what types of wastes are being created by your current storage system? There is always going to be a set of wastes that are created from the current storing system. It may not be very good with communicating. For example, you have one tool and it's supposed to be used on two different machines, right? Now, that tool, if you keep it next to one machine, the second machine doesn't know where the tool is. How are you going to solve this problem? Okay, so when you say that you have implemented, sorry, okay, implemented 5S, I think you need to go back and say that it is a continuous process. And that is why I showed the slide that don't look at them as five concentric circles. That means one more than or two more than Audi. Okay, look at them as a place where it keeps rolling. Okay, between Seri, Sito, Sito, Siketsu, and it's Shitsuke which is driving it. Okay, that's one thing. Then Satya says, is demarcation required for all workstation? Uh, it is called cleanliness, and you can spend too much of paint to talk about demarcation. But if the demarcation does not help you visually control anything, I don't think so it is working. Okay. Just by having it orderly, please be again very clear that cleanliness is to avoid the cleaning process, right? Now, safety can be put into place. I agree. Okay. But it's more of an eyeball control. Something should be inside is not inside. That means there is something wrong happening. And why did you demarcate it? You demarcated it because you standardized the operation. That means it is the best way of doing that operation. And then you demarked it. Okay. So it is not required. However, demarcation should be done for a purpose. If that purpose is met without demarcation, you can do without it. Suppose you don't have to maintain 5S inside the building, then what they could be able to follow is Mr. Vasant, uh, fail to understand. Okay, why should you need space to do 5S? You have to do 5S in the space you have. Okay, suppose you don't have space to put more than 5 work pieces. Okay, so be it. You need to devise a systems so that only 5 pieces are kept in place. So 5S is done to make sure that in the space you have, you're well organized. Okay. Now, suppose you have the space to maintain. Okay. Can you give us some inputs regarding internal and external 5S audit? Okay. This is done by, let me see who this person is. I think it is Vasant. No, Vikram. Vikram Kshatriya. Can you give us some inputs regarding internal and external 5S audit? Uh, Internal and external audits, I think, are audits only. Uh, External audits, if you don't have resources, you can get something external done. Otherwise, there's nothing legal. Okay. For doing audits, you need to have your work standardized before, right? And work can only be standardized. That means your cleanliness part you have reached. Okay. And since it is the best way of handling it, you need to have it in place. When you're doing an audit, you're actually auditing a factory first with feel to see that first two is properly done. Your identification, sorting, and straightening are absolutely fabulous. Okay, and then the age, how long have they been there? Okay, otherwise, you can find an expert to help you do an audit, which will be termed as external, and then later on you can take it internally. Okay. Text, demarking and labeling at monitor, mouse and keyboards. Yes, yes. If you're talking Satya, if you're talking about standardization, you can do anything anywhere, but please understand, don't waste your ink, your time on something that can be standardized by practice. Okay. If you need to count your inventory or if you have a barcode on your mouse, is part two. Okay. Please explain how contribute to 7 waste. Okay, we are coming to Amit. We are coming to that. Okay, when I move away from the practice of 7, I shall talk about 7 waste in Muda. Okay, uh, Mr. Ranga Rao. Okay, uh, I can only reiterate what I said before, that your audit is only worth it when you have done the standardization. That means that the cleanliness stage you have reached. Okay. Now, what do you audit for? Yes, for example, I quoted an example where I'm talking about sorting and straightening. And straightening means it has to be available for use in a location. However, the location doesn't have space. Okay. Now, you're going to audit this process as saying, okay, this guy doesn't have space where it's going to be used. So the material is going to be located in a different place. Is that place identified? Okay. Now, it can happen. There's a rod sometimes you use a chip or a cut piece. Both of them cannot be stored in the same place. Now, if the rod is supposed to be used, okay, where will the worker go? Okay, sorry. Then the second thing could be, is this step clearly mentioned? Or is it easy for the worker to go pick up? Then comes the issue of, does the worker need a help to transport this material to the workstation? Okay, if he requires help, it is a poor 5S. If he can himself push the trolley right to the place where the work is required, that means he can just change the trolley which is on wheels. Okay, it is a better 5S. So if you're trying to audit 5S procedures, 5S, you should look at such things for auditing. Okay, I will be very honest with you that I find auditing, okay, a very static thing. Okay, so it is always better to first see how is the practice of 5S harmonized or the practice of 4S harmonized by the fifth S. And gauge the maturity. So instead of audit, you should be looking at the maturity continuum of 5S. Okay. Now, when I say maturity continuum, that a company could be excellent in Cerecito. Okay. But it is still very poor in, let's say, the other two. Okay. And extremely non-existent fifth. That means Shitsuke doesn't exist. Now, you can gauge this company as a company which is on the way to practice 5S, but the maturity is very less. However, the effectiveness of sorting and straightening is extremely high. Now, it could be an iterative process. It could be so many things. And once they've stabilized on this, they can go to the cleaning and cleanliness part. Now, the movement of material, the movement of people, the layout of machine, they can be achieved. And then the cleanliness will also become better. Why? Because now it's very easy to access the machines and etc. Okay. So, Aarti Industries, I want 5S audit procedure. Now, I don't have it readily available with me. Okay, but whenever you don't know anything, you can always go search on the net. Okay, but don't do what is 5S, what is this, what is this. Do a thorough search on 5S practices in Toyota production system, a PDF document. Vikram, I don't think so. There's a certification in 5S. Okay, but anything which you want done has to be first done internally for you. Now, the practice of lean itself, okay, there is no certification course in lean. So you attend training programs in lean. And that's what makes it extremely tough because there are only principles of lean. Now, the application of principles of lean, convert them into tools of lean. So if you say you're practicing the tools of lean, that doesn't mean you're practicing lean. So the principles have to be applied to your shop floor. And that could mean that you develop your own tools for it. And hence, when we talk about, certification, okay, there's no certification available. Yes, Quality Council of India may help you to say that you have attended this level of training of lean, this level of training of lean, which could be various levels of lean training. Okay, and various levels of lean training will require you to actually attend training, different training programs. It will not be always lecturing. So there is a tough thing to follow. Okay, and again, a very important part of the Japanese culture to talk about it, because without identification of waste, okay, Vasant says if there's some machines kept in a passageway because they don't have space, then you could give marks to them, either put complied or not complied. Okay, he's suggesting this is how you could go for auditing. But this is again conformance and non-conformance approach. That means conformance and non-conformance to what? Where is the standard on lean? Okay, so it usually begins with you doing first 2S properly, the second 2S, and then converting it into a standard that you think is properly done. Okay, okay. So I come back to uh, starting my PPT again. Okay, at this. Can everybody see this? Can you see this? Can you see this? Kokila? Okay. I need an input. Kokila, some voice. Somebody? Okay, I'm beginning my PPT. Okay. I'm taking it away from Okay, now let us see that this is how I use these examples and shop floor examples to explain what does 5S mean. Okay, and because most of the practices till now have been only okay uh, on shop floor, it is easy to relate. Okay, but please be aware that 5S is also a driving principle in whole of operations management. Okay, like another example is if you have removed all the muda from your shop floor, okay, you can still remove muda from a supply chain. Who says you cannot remove muda from supply chain? Right? And for removing muda from the supply chain, this is how we decide to tier the supply chain and etc. etc. We decide which vendor is going to work on which part. Okay. So similarly, the 5S, when applied to operations management, could be used in these four areas at least. Identifying muda on the shop floor, balancing material flow to tact time, supplier coordination and purchase, and also stepping stone to JIT. Balancing material to tact time. Okay, I will just narrate this and carry on because it gets too technical and I'm trying to avoid that. For example, you have a tact time of 200 items per hour, or maybe let's say 10 cars per hour. And there is a place where a worker is supposed to work. So the area of a worker tightening certain bolts and nuts is defined. Let's say it's 5 feet. Okay. So his zone is marked by a yellow line to begin with, and the end line is yellow. Beyond that end line becomes a red line. That means he cannot go beyond the red line. And most of his work should finish between the two yellow lines. Okay. Shortening and straightening that he has to make sure that he gets it. Now, just imagine where the nut and bolt has to be placed. If the conveyor belt is moving slowly, naturally the nut and bolt have to be placed nearby each other. If the conveyor belt is moving very fast, in the same time he will cover more distance. So the nut and bolt have to be placed differently. Okay. We're talking about material flow to tact time. Naturally, tact time is what is pulling the material. It can also happen that many times the supervisor is seeing that this particular person is very often crossing the red line. That means before the red line, he's supposed to finish his job. And if it crosses the red line, he has to press the stop the conveyor. That means now the speed at which the conveyor is moving, it is not matching with the person's operation. So what he can do is he can divide this work into two people. That means two people are working on the machine. Now, the moment you start working on this, you can say um, uh, stage of operation, two people, you need to be very clear which inventory needs to be present with which man. Okay. Now you have changed the sorting and straightening to balance the takt time. Okay. This is how we look at 5S to support takt time, or we can say that it is not possible for you to achieve this takt time because the availability and operations are not in place. The shortening and straightening is not correct or not possible. Somebody had asked, how do we identify muda on the shop floor? Okay. First of all, there is no software to tell us what type of muda is on the shop floor. Only observation tells us so. Okay. Now, if you are going to observe the muda on the shop floor, okay, where else would you start but from 5S? If you don't have anything organized, if everything is everywhere, okay, so let's look at the 7 mudas. One person, he is unnecessarily moving. Okay. Why? Because we have not decided to straighten. He's checking on every part he picks up. Okay. He goes to the store to bring the tools. He goes to the store to issue the material. Excessive motion, excessive transportation. And then to save his motion, he will bring in extra material. So there is extra inventory on the shop floor. How do you get to know there's extra inventory on the shop floor? Which software is telling you that? No software is telling you where the inventory is located. Okay. So now just imagine you have identified places where the inventory is going to be kept. And you've also decided how many bins will be there. All this is 5S. Okay. One of the things is you can have a quantity designed by your Kanban, that this is the count of material that should be flowing in. Okay. But if you don't locate the place, how does the guy or the operator know that the material is finishing, it needs to be replenished, etc. So if you have 5S in place, you are able to identify what type of MODA exists. Okay. Now, over a period of time, you have to reduce the motion. You have to reduce the travel. Then you can move the storage of the raw material closer to the place where it's being used. So 5S is the first step, or you can say beginning of a eyeball control, visual factory, and it is through visual identification that you find out MODA on the shop floor. Otherwise, how do you decide to improve the layout? You decide to improve the layout because there's material being pushed by too many people inside, there's a traffic jam, there's no clear gangways. Okay. Then you decide to do the layout of the machines. That re-layout will reduce MODA of motion, MODA of travel, MODA of inventory location, etc. etc. Okay. So this is how you begin to identifying MODA. Okay. Let's then look at it that you have got very clearly demarcated places. Okay. Now you know where and how much was the item rejected. Okay. In other words, you are only able to find out what are the true rejection levels, when, how, what caused rejection, when you have a very clear identifier in 5S to locate the rejection. How do you know the rejection happened? Because you know by now that the machine is working well, the item is trained, the process is standardized. Okay. Any variability that could have caused this rejection has been removed. It was working the best. So that is how you find out where the rejection happened, when it happened, in what shift happened. Okay. It's not that you keep throwing everything rejection, then once a week you take it out. So 5S is also telling you that the mood of rejection can be managed only when there is a correct way, okay, of sorting it out. And then we also know when it got rejected, who was working on it, and etc. Okay. Now let's come to the mood of motion and travel. Right? Whether the man is traveling or the material is traveling, both of them are same. I've already mentioned this very well. If you're going to locate your stores or you're going to store your tools and your inventory to work on, it is better to locate it as close to the place of use as possible. Now, this will stop the operator from moving. That means the flow of the material is not hindered. Material is available, machine is available, tool is available. Why should the material flow stop? The reason why it will stop is only when if the operator is forced to look somewhere else or he has an excuse to go somewhere else. Now, if you still want to do 5S better, okay, in the Jidoka principle, we always say that if the machine could work by itself, okay, and decide to move out the item after it is worked, load itself, offload itself, okay, we know that now the man is become irrelevant to the flow of material. Okay, so you identify MODA. Okay, let's look at MODA of overproduction and wrong production. Can only be controlled by better straightening and sorting. Okay, overproduction is the worst type of MODA. Okay, it is very often called high batch size, but overproduction also means before time. Okay, so now if we have okay a correct sequence, that means sorting is very straight. First thing we have done is we have avoided the change of sequence of production. That means overproduction is not happening in correct sequence. Wrong production. It can happen that you don't have a clear straightening forward and you have the same input raw material to produce two different parts. Okay. The the scheduling has released a schedule of production and you'll operate in this sequence and this quantity. And if your straightening is not proper, it can happen that the wrong quantity can get produced before time, and hence overproduction and wrong production can happen simultaneously. And you will only get to know much later, okay, when the time of delivery happens, which will usually be 2 days later. Okay. So again, this is how the Muda on the shop floor is controlled by 5S. You can give a host of IoT and RFID and everything in place, but nothing more simpler than eyeball control. Now, if you're going to design a system like this, okay, you think of ways of doing it, but this is how you control Muda on the shop floor by 5S. If there's excessive inventory, you just make sure that you cannot keep more than, for example, you cannot keep more than two drills or one screwdriver or thing on a visual display board. There's no slot for the second one. How will the extra screwdriver be purchased first? Second, in case there's one screwdriver lying down, that means it is missing from somewhere else. Okay, so we decide to make sure that the two pillars of TQ of Toyota production system, that is Jidoka and just in time, are constantly being looked at through 5S. What should be done is decided by JIT and Jidoka, the principles of JIT and Jidoka. So when you're practicing 5S, make sure that you are doing it for a purpose. And that's the example I've taken here in Muda on shop floor. Let's look at supply coordination and purchase. Direct online suppliers know it very well that online supplies are limited by space. The moment you limit it by space, what are you doing? You are communicating to the supplier when to get and if you've standardized the storage and how much to get. And third is where to locate it. So you are straightening it properly. So there is FIFO. Okay. And if the FIFO is properly maintained, you can imagine that a supplier delivering a different component for a different car in the same location. Okay. Now also understand that this no signal is being sent, no order has been sent to the supplier for coordination. The rate of use of the material on the line triggers off the supply order or replenishment order, sorry, and when it has to come. The coordination is not involving a human being. How have you achieved this? You have made sure that your sorting and straightening, okay, is perfect. And it's so perfect that it allows for FIFO, it allows for triggering of the replenishment, and also tells you where to locate yourself. Okay. Now, when your 5S is working, the purchase can't order more inventory than that can be used in the near future if sorting will flag it as unusable. Just imagine the material cannot enter the factory. Why? Because it's more than the quantity I asked for. And why is more quantity called useless? Because I don't need to use it in the near future. How am I controlling it? I'm controlling it by the space I'm allowing it to have. Today, all major companies use an ERP software to make sure that excess material doesn't enter. If the excess material doesn't enter, I don't need to store it. If I don't need to store it, I don't need to have a store. If I don't have a store, I don't need to have a storing system. If I don't have a storing system, I don't need manpower, I don't need software, I don't need retrieval systems. Huge cost is avoided by only sorting. How am I sorting? I'm starting with not ordering more than I need something today. The purchase and suppliers are controlled to avoid excess inventory because 5S practice doesn't allow them to purchase extra or before time. Right? It is not only software control, how much you can get because everybody wants more. Okay. When to get, all this is now eyeball control. For example, you have 5 bins kept, and as one starts consuming or removing the bins from storage, behind that comes a visual identification of green, yellow, and red. Okay. Why should this be there? It is there in for straightening purpose, because if it is in red, that means this material is falling short. Yellow, that's where it should be. Green, chill, don't take any action on it. Okay. All these things, for example, if this inventory storage is between two stages of production, so for any item, if it is red visible, we know that we have to produce that. If there are 4 red visible, the one with the higher red I can see is the one I need to produce before. Now, this is how we remove management practices from the shop floor by using 5S. Like I said before, 5S is where you start collecting data from your shop floor. Okay. So just in time needs very good information on flow for the right item to be produced in right quantity. 5S provides that visual signal by making, etc., etc. Okay. So if you want to start making JIT, so you first find out exactly where the material is storing up. If you want to see if it's storing up, how much excessive it is there, how can I remove the excess, how should the material flow, and is the flow being interrupted by capacity or rate of production, etc., etc. Now, if you keep improving this, you need to standardize it. Only when you have standardized it, okay, and that can only happen after your straightening step is in time, do you begin. Now, JIT is a self-correcting system. Okay, if you keep doing inspection inside it, okay, that means somebody is doing the work. We are very sure that he's not able to do the work because the eyeball control of the instructions to him are not very good. You'll have to do checking and rechecking. And this is again a job of the 5S to make sure that the person doing the job is doing it in a standardized way and is also sure that he is doing it right. Okay. And third is communication through visuals. I've always said that visual control is one of the pillars of Jidoka. Okay. And finally, 5S maintains FIFO, which is extremely important for JET because on many times on the same line or on the same machine, we are producing different items. And we need to know or to produce them in right quantity because in case there's assembly down the line, the item should not be late and delay the assembly. Okay. You have to implement 5S by practice. Okay. The simplicity of 5S allows it to be practiced, but the discipline is the only way to perfection. So the 4S has been defined, but if you want to perfect it, you need to make sure that you get into the discipline. That means learning and re-putting it, okay? In other words, what I've been trying to say is perfection means simplicity as seen by most of the Japanese practices. The more you are able to simplify it, the more you can make it look like the Japanese garden, okay? You will see that there's a lot of harmony and all the men material machine, okay, are used properly to support the, you can say, the 2 pillars of Toyota production system or lean manufacturing. Like I said, the way to get started is to quit talking and start doing. Okay. Thank you. Fine. I can take questions. Hello? Yes.
Yes, sir. Yeah, now I request Ajit to please allow mic to the participant. Otherwise, you can write your. So,
Okay. Who
thank
is
you,
it?
sir. Now I request Ajit to allow mic to all the participant. And sir, you can
Give me
stop
one.
sharing your presentation.
I'm allowed to
And
wait only.
yeah, so here we have few questions in the chat box also. Although sir has given the answer to all the questions previously, so these are the repeated questions also. So sir, can you please stop sharing your presentation and access the chats?
Ma'am,
I
mics
have
are allowed
stopped
for
sharing the
everyone.
presentation.
Yeah, mic is also allowed, and few questions are also there. Kindly enlarge the sir, if possible, please share the PPT. Yes, regarding the PPT, we have to take permission from sir. If he allows us to share the PPT, then only we'll be able to share it. And other questions, sir, Shishir sir, hope you are able to see the questions.
Yes, I'm seeing some of the questions. Uh, Kaushal Ritesh says, what is the difference between 5S, 6S? Should we need 6S or not? If not, then how does 5M improve? Okay, Kaushal, let me answer it very, very simply. Okay. What I presented here is 5S, and 5S has been the principle in Toyota forever. When I say forever, that means from 1970s to 2018. Okay. Now, there is a fashion by people who create knowledge by adding more dimensions to it. Okay. Now, 6S safety, it actually does not, okay, need an addition to it because 5S is looking for that. It's already inbuilt inside it. When we are trying to sort and standardize, that means you're making sure that the product is produced at its best. And please understand that safety is the lowermost foundation in Japan. Stability. Okay. So if you want to teach, you want to highlight, you want to make it look more flamboyant, you can add safety. But the principle remains scientific. Okay. It covers the whole gamut and it's a matured understanding of 5S. It does not need any more addition. Okay. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Let us say Mr. Ganesh. Yes.
Sir, just I want to get some inputs. What are the challenges we are going to face while implementing 6S in the operations, sir? Shop floor, actually. I'm from garment
Actually,
industry,
shop.
Shai Export, sir.
Okay, okay, nice. Okay, so basically 6S or 5S, whatever you're doing, okay. The okay, let me begin with giving you the fundamentals. In lean, all we are trying to do is to get the shortest lead time. Okay, when you get an order and when you supply. Okay,
Yes, sir.
now this is the identity. So anything that reduces the throughput time or the reduces the lead time is called improvement.
Okay, sir.
Fine. Now, when you're trying to implement on the shop floor, you have so many people, let's say sewing or cutting or whatever maybe, okay? And we often see that there's a sewing department, then there is a cutting department, and the material is being moved.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, if you can reduce the time between when the material arrives in your factory and it gets packed for
Okay.
dispatch, okay, and you can make sure that this time is stable. When I say stable, that means if you want to pack 500, it will take you 2 weeks. If you want to pack 200, it will take you 1 week, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, if if this is the way you're working, you need to make sure that your time is stable. That means whether it is 500 or 200, it gets packed in the same time. Okay,
Correct.
you balance flow. Then you can start working backwards. That if the dispatch date is on the 15th, I'll start production on the 1st, and by 15th, I've got it done. What does this do? It does not allow inventory to be on the shop floor for long periods of time. When there's no inventory on the shop floor, you don't need to move, you don't need to sort, you don't need to, do so many things. This is how you would work towards 5S. Now, how you're going to move it, how we know where which has to be done, what has to be done is your identification by red tagging, yellow tagging, green tagging. Okay. And
traffic light
things like
system,
that.
sir. Traffic light
Fine.
system also will follow.
You can do. Okay. Don't call them traffic light system. Call them tools. Okay. Your system is a bigger level thing. Okay. Now, why am I saying this is you can say that my traffic light system is working, but my order is not going on time. Okay. This is exactly what you don't have to achieve. You have to achieve that my order has to go on time. Okay. And in the shortest possible time I have to manufacture. To support that, I have more tools like traffic light tools and things like that. If you start being good at traffic light, it is no use if you're still not sending it out on time. And that is why I said that your system should be to send out the order on time, and traffic light is a tool. Okay.
Yes,
and
sir.
all this comes in 5S. All this comes in 5S.
Okay.
And many times you will see that you have put a small order behind a big order. Right? Now, and if this is how you sent it, that means the big order is going to delay the small order. The correct sorting would be send the small order before the big order. Okay. Now, if this is how you sorted it, this is how you scheduled it. But when it goes on the shop floor guy can start with the bigger order first and smaller order later. Okay. This is again a malpractice in straightening part of the 5S.
Done, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay.
So, Mr. Ganesh D, he raised his hand. So, have you asked your question, Mr. Ganesh?
Yes, madam.
Yes. Mr. Ganesh has asked this question.
Thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
And Mr. Sunil Kapoor, he has written one big question. So, sir, have you given the answer to that?
If the raw material needed for production is quite bulky and there is not enough space at the shop floor, how do we implement 5S here? Yes, it is, Mr. Kapoor, this is a very acceptable state of being. Okay. Now, when you say it is bulky, okay, it can mean two things. That one piece itself is too big to be kept in the place, which is again wrong. But if it is bulky and you say that you're going to keep all of it in the place where it's going to be used, is wrong. You can divide the bulk. For example, if it is plastic, okay,
take it as voluminous.
Voluminous. Yes, yes. So you would need to break it down into small batches. Okay, sir. Okay.
Would
And
you also
make sure
like
that
to highlight the role of top management in successful implementation of 5S?
Definitely. Definitely. There is to be really honest, the head should be the person chairing the committee for 5S implementation. Because the way he frames policies, if he says buy bulk, buy cheap, okay, he's telling the purchase department to be disconnected to the stores department. Okay, and if the stores department gets disconnected from this department and the shop floor department, we create unnecessary effort in straightening and a lot of excess inventory is there. Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So, any other question? Because we are running short of time also, so we can take only two more questions now.
Okay.
So
I'm
Mr.
reading
Tarun
out what
Kohli has
Mr.
written one
Tarun
question.
Kohli has written.
Yeah.
Any tips how to inculcate these good practices among workers till last level in Indian context? What apart from training session can be additionally done? Okay. It is extremely simple, Mr. Kohli. Shitsuke, I said, is lead by example. Okay. And the shop floor worker understands variability much more than the manager who is managing him. I can stand guarantee to that. Okay. Now, whenever you're trying to put something to practice, okay, it is always clear to define it from the user's point of view. Just because I have come to a training session and I know what Serisito happens and I know, okay, it doesn't mean that I have enough knowledge to put it to practice. I've seen many times that people don't look at the work they're doing every day. because they've done so much, they can look left, right, and keep moving their hands. And this is the place where the biggest learning is not taking place. If you keep looking at the work, how the water is falling into a, let's say, jug, and how the jug is falling into a glass, what can I do better in the glass and things like that. If you don't keep your eyes on it, you are not learning. The same thing happens in 5S. If you are not able to pinpoint every aspect that makes a job successful and how to reduce it to show it, the worker or anybody practicing it will shortcut it. Why? Because we in India, okay, have got a learning disability. And the learning disability is, however good we may be, we think that practice and theory are two separate things.
So any other question? Last question we can take right now. So can any other question, participant? Otherwise, that's all from Quality Council of India. So no more question.
The certificate, madam.
Yeah. So
Hello.
so before we
Yes.
conclude this
Okay.
session,
Am I back?